Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. I think I'm audible now. So, I'm going to be talking about the practical aspects of endophthalmitis only, not covering the whole topic as such because it is too vast. The first statement is we may be clever, but the organisms get cleverer. And I'm illustrating this with an example. You see, there is hardly any anterior chamber reaction. The anterior chamber is quiet. There's a mild pupillary membrane. I go on to do a vitrectomy. I see that there is some vitreous exudates which I clear. And for a quiet anterior segment, when I go in, I see a giant retinal tear and a completely necrosed retina which is white. I put PFCL, exchange it with silicone oil, but the case is practically lost. You see these exudates over there and the necrotic retina. So for a quiet eye, this was a big surprise. So it can be that you have a very good anterior segment, but a very bad posterior segment, and you need to be careful about that. The second case is absolutely the reverse. You have a very bad anterior segment. See the vitreous exudate, the anterior segment exudative membrane, which I am removing, is tough. The IOL behind is covered with exudate. I am trying to explant that. It's a little bit difficult because of the adhesions, but finally I do manage it. You see the glow behind is also completely yellow. I have begun my vitrectomy now after peeling off the epithelium, and for the first few minutes I see nothing but all yellow. When I try to approach the retina after clearing off the mid-vitreous, you can see that the posterior segment now comes in view, and you see by the blood vessels there that the posterior segment is relatively good. There's hardly any papillophlebitis and any hemorrhages, and I fill this eye with oil and the patient did quite well. So what I want to highlight by this is that endophthalmitis can have a very, very variable presentation. The second point I want to highlight, and this is a very important practical tip, we may be resilient, but the organisms get resistant. Variable antibiotic sensitivity, and what we are dealing with nowadays is multi-drug resistant endophthalmitis. I'm illustrating with a case. 24 hours after surgery, the patient presented with endophthalmitis, was injected with vancomycin and ceftazidime with a vitreous aspirate, didn't really do well in the next 24 hours, so we decided to do a 23 gauge vitrectomy with endolaser with piperacillin and tazobactam, the next higher antibiotic, along with silicone oil injection. If you see the surgery, I'm clearing off the AC now of the hypopion. I'm doing a little bit of mid anterior vitrectomy to clear off as much as vitreous as possible. Now you can see the exudate over there on the retina. I want to approach this area actually, and the only way I can do that is by inducing a PVD. They say you cannot be so aggressive in an endophthalmitis case, but if I would have left this epiretinal exudate without clearing off the membranes and the stuck vitreous onto these membranes, I would not have had a good retina at the end. So I also shave the base, I do a good peripheral cleanup, I also endolaser 360 degrees. What I find in this case is very surprising. You see over here the organism is Pseudomonas aeruginosa, but you see its antibiotic sensitivity. It is resistant to everything you can think of, to piperacillin tazobactam, to ceftazidime, to imipenem, to gentamicin, to ciprofloxacin, everything that you can think of. You have hardly anything left in your armamentarium, and there it is sensitive to colistin. Now what do you do in such a case? Do you actually wait for improvement or wait for antibiotic susceptibility report to show that it is resistant to piptas, or you continue your treatment? If you're going to give colistin, how do you actually calculate the intravitreal dose, because it is an uncommon antibiotic? What is the ideal prophylaxis required during cataract surgery in order to prevent this? And whether my aggressive approach was of any good of shaving the base and clearing off the epiretinal exudates? The first question to answer, should we have waited? I don't think so. Clinical response is the best indicator. No matter what the culture report shows you, if you clinically have a good response, you please do continue with the same, because in vitro sensitivity is different from in vivo sensitivity. Colistin, how do you calculate the intravitreal dose? The first priority here is that do not inject an overdose, because it may lead to retinal toxicity. Now how do you calculate? You see this table over here, standard, which they give you in all books. You see a whole lot of intravitreal antibiotics and their doses, but you see that colistin figures nowhere in the list. So how do you actually calculate colistin dose? You can actually calculate the intravitreal dose from the intravenous dose. Intravenous vancomycin, for example, we all know is 500 milligram given 12 hourly. which is 1000 milligram over 24 hours. This is in 5 liters of blood in our body, which is 5000 ml. So the dose would be 1000 milligram by 5000, which would be approximately 1 milligram per ml. This is multiplied by the vitreous volume, and if you have to inject only 0.1 ml, you get this as 1 milligram. This is how you calculate. So let's apply the same formula to even colistin. You have 2.5 to 5 milligram per kg in 24 hours as the body intravenous dose. That comes to 2.5, 150 to 300 milligrams in 5 liters of blood. If you apply that and make it into 5 ml of vitreous, you divide 5 by 5000, you get 0.3 milligram or 0.515 milligram, and you inject that in 0.1 ml, and that is the intravitreal dose. We calculated it without referring to any table or any literature. You can alternatively also calculate intravitreal dose from MIC 90. Does anyone know what MIC 90 is? Minimum inhibitory concentration of the antibiotic required to kill 90% of the bacteria. We see here, we are taking the example of imipenem, where it is 16 microgram per ml. Applying the same formula, 16 microgram for MIC 90 makes it 18 microgram for MIC 100. 18 microgram in 5 ml of vitreous comes to 16 into 5, 80 micrograms. You take 90 micrograms because you want MIC 100, and the dose of imipenem, actually, if you see the literature, it is 100 microgram per 0.1 ml. You calculated it from the MIC here. The next question, what prophylaxis do you really need to do during cataract surgery? A lot of literature says you use intracameral cefuroxime. I do not know the commercial availability of it. Intracameral moxifloxacin, we all know, is now available commercially. I use it in most of my cases. Intracameral vancomycin added to balanced salt solution, I do not favor this because it does not cover gram negative. Intracameral povidone iodine. Now this is a newer concept here. You add povidone iodine in such lower concentration that it does not cause any toxicity. There are literature reports of it, but it has to be proven in larger studies. So the last approach of mine, aggressive approach, does it work in such cases? Inducing a PVD, shaving the base, going the full Monty, injecting silicone oil, doing a good base excision, will it serve your purpose rather than just doing core vitrectomy, which was said earlier? So complete vitrectomy has these advantages. It helps clear the bacterial load, it prevents cyclitic membrane induced hypotony, it prevents epiretinal proliferation and ERM formation, prevents peripheral base contraction, break formation and late onset RD. Silicone oil itself has antibacterial and fungistatic property and prevents prolonged contact of pus-filled vitreous with the retinal surface. I'm going to give you a few examples. This is what I did with an ENDOF case. There was a lot of epiretinal exudates on the surface, and I removed it or suctioned it all off from the surface to prevent the bacterial toxicity with the already periphlebitic and sclerosed frosted branch vessels that you see over here in this video. So to the extent that you see the vitreous here looks so completely clean, even the periphery, and you see this frosted branch appearance, the post-op period of this patient was very good. The patient did really well despite so much of periphlebitis to begin with. Here I am doing a vitrectomy, again trying to remove the epiretinal exudates. In doing that, what I notice while inducing a PVD here is that I am having a retinal break and a retinal detachment in the periphery. So I see to it that I shave off the base in the periphery. I see that detached retina bullous there with the periphlebitic vessels. I do as much of complete vitrectomy up to the periphery as I can. I do an air fluid exchange draining from the horseshoe tear there. And I give a good endolaser not only to the break but also to the ischemic areas. So this is a complete case that did really well. To begin with, I am removing the AC exudation. I am removing the vitreous now, doing a core vitrectomy. The PVD is hard to come by because of the adherent sticky vitreous, but I am still going to do all the same so as to remove the epiretinal exudates from the retina. If I get a peripheral break while doing this, I am going to address it intraoperatively. I am putting these antibiotics. You can see the precipitate of Vanco with Septa, and I am going to fill it up with oil. Intraoperatively, though the vitreous cap came as negative, you see 1 month after injection, did an SOR surgery, you see the post-operative fundus before and after surgery. Before and after surgery, you see the way it has cleared even the retina, and the patient actually gained 6/9 vision here. So there are these cases where one can't do the full Monty. You cannot do an aggressive intervention. In fact, you can't do anything much. This is a highlight where you have a ring exudate, you have a sutural wound there, you have iris popping out of it. Look at the corneal edema. There is hardly anything to salvage in the eye. When you go inside, you can hardly see anything, and in this, you just do a core vitrectomy. There is no view to do anything beyond that. But there are those cases where you needn't do everything, and those are the low grade or the chronic bacterial endophthalmitis or the fungal ones, as you see here. The view is pretty good. What you see are a few cotton ball exudates that you see over here. You're going to do a complete PVD, you're going to remove as much vitreous as possible like the previous cases, but you needn't put silicone oil in this case because it's not going to cause a base contraction. The vitreous does not look that sticky so as to cause post-operative membrane formation, tears, and so on. So when you have such a variable presentation with such a broad spectrum of endophthalmitis presentation, what is the diagnostic dilemma here? I think I have a minute, I'll wind up now. You have mainly two types of endophthalmitis, acute and chronic. Acute is going to be differentiated from TAS, where predominantly it presents less than 24 hours. There is no or minimal pain. Corneal edema and IOP is way more than hypopyon and fibrin as compared to definite endophthalmitis, where you have hypopyon as a predominant feature. In between that is going to be presumptive endophthalmitis when a TAS does not respond to steroids. You're going to then follow either a vitreous tap or a vitrectomy. So you have three presentations of acute endophthalmitis. Similarly, you're going to have three presentations of chronic endophthalmitis. One is pseudophakic uveitis, more than 2 weeks, average being 6 weeks. Recurrent redness and photophobia, you're going to have more KPs and CME and capsular plaque as compared to diffuse vitritis and focal inferior exudates that you see in chronic endophthalmitis. Somewhere in between that, when a pseudophakic uveitis does not respond properly to steroids or keeps recurring, it is presumptive or preemptive chronic endophthalmitis, where you either do a vitreous tap with a bag wash or you do a partial or total capsulectomy along with IOL explantation. A few examples here to wind up. Pseudophakic uveitis, you get predominantly CME, KPs and iris pigment dispersion on the lens. You see that the lens is clearly malpositioned over here. If you see the slit lamp photo, you see one haptic is out, another one is in the bag. You see that there is this iris pigment diffuse dispersion, but there is no plaque that you can see. You can see a few vitreous strands in the AC, and that should give you a clue. As against that, this is infective pathology. Though it looks very uveitic, you see the plaque over here. It can be a focal plaque or a focal plaque on the anterior capsule or a diffuse plaque. This was a fungal end-off case, or an organized hypopyon with a capsular plaque that is seen behind the IOL.